In 2014, MH370 caught the world's attention when it went missing from a routine flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. This flight caught my attention in mysterious crashes. I went with US aviation journalist Christine Negroni to visit the world's first mysterious crash. We visited the 1931 crash site, along with the world's premier experts on the crash, Ron and Kath Frew. On the way home, we went past the Kuma Memorial for the crash. We decided to have a chat. Hello Christine, nice to see you again.
Eve, it's always good to be with you.
Thank you. So, I would like to hear about your book that you've been writing. Could you just tell me a little bit about that one?
Okay, so my book is about aviation mysteries, and it was triggered by the disappearance of Malaysia 370 back in 2014. We were talking a bit about how when that plane disappeared, everyone said there'd never been another, there'd never been an airliner to disappear, and it didn't seem right to me. So I started looking back in history and discovered that, in fact, there had been many airliners that had disappeared. And when I say many, I don't mean hundreds, but there had been certainly, dozens over the course of time. So I wrote a book in which I compared the disappearance of Malaysia 370 against earlier mysterious accidents, including the loss of a Pan Am Clipper in 1938. So my book talks about those mysteries. It doesn't just talk about mysterious accidents, though. It also talks about the way investigations are handled, and sometimes the way accidents happen because of the mystery of the way humans work, the fallibility of humans, and the way humans perform. So the mysterious fallibility and the mysterious resiliency of humans. So it takes you through accidents all the way to how we try and prevent accidents by improving on the way humans design things and the way humans perform.
In Christine's book, she compares MH370 to a Pan American Clipper that went missing on its flight from Guam to Manila. How come you chose that flight, the Clipper flight, when it wasn't the first plane to go missing?
You're right, it wasn't the first to go missing, but what I liked about it in terms of its use as a literary device in my book was the fact that in the case of the Pan Am Clipper, we were in a period of time in American history and world history, in fact, in which there was great tension between the Japanese and the West. And that when that plane disappeared, there was immediate concern that the Japanese had somehow sabotaged the plane or hijacked the plane. And in Malaysia 370, the same thing. There is this clash of cultures right now between the Arab and the Muslim world and the Western world. And when Malaysia 370 disappeared, a lot of people started thinking, oh, it must be Islamic terrorism. So I thought those parallels in geopolitics were interesting. I also thought the fact that neither plane, when the Pan Am Clipper went down, nothing was ever seen of it again, and also that people were looking in places where they thought it might be, but they really had no idea where it might be. At the time when I started writing the book, no piece of Malaysia 370 had been found. So it had that in common, and it also had in common the fact that people thought it might be one place, and they were looking in places where it turned out that it had not gone. So there were many parallels, and I did like the symmetry of that. I wanted to show people that in aviation, there are many, many ways that history repeats itself. And these two accidents, to me, really illustrated that.
So the first plane to go missing and never be found, obviously, was the Southern Cloud, and that's kind of why we're here today. Do you want to have a talk about what's behind us, maybe?
I do. I want to talk about what's behind us, but I also want to talk about your experience with the Southern Cloud, because in all my writings about aviation accidents, I've never actually brought someone with me to look at an airplane crash wreckage, and I'm very curious to hear your perspective. But just for your readers or listeners or viewers, I will say that the Southern Cloud disappeared in 1931 on a flight from Sydney to Melbourne. and no one knew where the plane went down. It just failed to arrive at its destination. Now, communication technology and meteorological forecasting was not as advanced as it is today, obviously. The pilots encountered weather they did not expect, much greater than what the plane could handle, probably, and no one knew where it went down, so there were reports from all over this stretch of Australia about where the plane had disappeared. It disappeared for 26 years, if my math is correct, but it was finally found by a hiker in the woods of the Snowy Mountains. And when the wreckage was found, some of it was pulled up for the investigation, some of it was pulled up by souvenir hunters, and some of it was pulled up and used finally to make this memorial, which is where we are in Cooma, forgive me, I got it wrong, in Cooma, and that's what we're sitting in front of here. 2 pieces of engine that were found, and the engine in the middle, which we both know it was a reproduction made for the memorial, but it was of the engine, the kind of engine used at the time. So we made our walk, and you saw pieces of the airplane like this, still sitting there 70 years later. What did you think of it? What was your impression?
Well, I thought it was pretty special to think that so many years ago, people spent so long looking for this, and I could go through and I could walk the same path that the person who found this would have walked, and I could see the same things that they saw. I mean, we had a nice path for, the first 14 kilometers, but the last 200 meters was really scrambling through the bush. It was quite hard, and it really gave me a taste for it. It made me feel for the person who actually had to come and find it, and it was a pretty special to be touching history like that. And I think if the plane had have gone down today, they would have been a lot more careful with the way the investigation was done, and the fact that I could just go down and touch this stuff. I'm probably never going to have a chance to actually touch such an important crash, like the evidence like that, ever again, and it's pretty spectacular.
It's interesting to me that you could see these pieces out there in the forest. And I was wondering, but of course I was, sort of experiencing it myself, but I was wondering, what is it like to be a young person, sort of having learned about air accidents from the TV programs you watch and having attended the conference with me, and now seeing what it's like to be an investigator? Did you have any sense of what that job is like?
It's got like a lot of components to it. You got to, first on the first front, you're trying to actually find out why the plane went down, but there's a lot of things behind it. There's media, there's a lot of things you have to deal with, families who want to know what happened, and you're just trying to figure it out. You're trying to get the facts straight, to tell it to people. The job entails a lot, and kind of seeing that you can gather so much about what happened in the flight just from seeing how the wreckage was dispersed and how it crashed. All these things can be analysed. I'm guessing it's such a technical job. It would be possibly difficult, especially back then. Mm-hmm. It was really hard, and I feel for them.
Yeah. Now, the difference between that airplane crash and what an investigator would find in most accident sites is that there was no passage of time. There would be no passage of time. For what you saw, it really wasn't like any accident scene, because so much of it had been taken, so much of it had fallen, trees growing out of the middle of it. So you may see it and think, how could you ever figure this out? But in fact, I'd say it would be pretty difficult for just about anybody. And we know from reading the book, in fact, that even in 1958, when they did the investigation, they were very limited in what they could find out, even when they did find some of the pieces.
Yeah, and the fact that when they first went up to find it, they brought people who were looking for souvenirs. I mean, today we kind of think that's inappropriate. Like, you come to a crash site and people were trying to find gold watches, bits of shoes, people's clothes, souvenirs, like a bit of metal from the plane. It just seems so crazy. The Southern Cloud crash contained many mysteries. One of the key mysteries was the mystery of the lights. On a town not far from the crash site, on the night of the crash, residents reported seeing flashes. They flashed back and received more reciprocal flashbacks. Unfortunately, reporters discounted this evidence.
You know, another thing that I found interesting about the accident, I'm curious to know your thoughts, is that there wasn't just one mystery, there were many. The mystery of the lights, the mystery of the memorial, the mystery of how Tom happened to be walking in this particular spot in this huge area of the woods. What did you make of all the multiple mysteries?
We just didn't have enough data back then. Like, there was no contact from the air to the ground, and that just leaves a lot of guessing spots for everybody. I particularly am very interested in the lights and the fact where the camera was positioned and the evidence. After reading the book, it does leave your mind whirling because you do get the author's perspective only. You always tend to be tainted by what they think. But yeah, and then you go off and we talk to an expert like Ron and his wife, and you hear a different perspective, and then you're wondering to yourself, which one is it really, and how would they know, and what arguments do they have to each side of that?
This is a way I think that accidents actually haven't changed over the years, and that is that there are so many roads, there are so many possibilities. And now we go back to Malaysia 370 and think of all the theories that came out afterwards. And they were all, you know, not all of them, not the Martians perhaps, but so many of them were possible. And we still don't know with Malaysia 370. In my book, as you know, I've put forward a theory that I think is the most likely, but I could be wrong. You know, we don't know, and we may not know. And in the case of the Southern Cloud, we don't know why people said in a far place away from where the plane actually went down that they saw and heard the plane. And we don't know why witnesses saw lights on the hill, but you know, they said they did, maybe they did. We don't know what phenomenon created that. And that, in this respect, I think all accidents, and this does come up a lot in my book, every accident that I examine in my book, and there are more than a dozen, there's a probable cause, or maybe they never found the probable cause, but there's also, but it could have been that. And this, it could have been this, it could have been that. To me, that's kind of an interesting, it's an interesting facet. We think there's an air accident investigation, there's a probable cause, it's buttoned up, that's the way it happened. But as Ron said to us, remember, he said history is really all about people's recollections and what input goes into those recollections. Could be fact, could be fantasy, could be, you know, speculation over coffee, but it all gets woven together and becomes the history. So history, air accident investigations, I guess we can think of them as not as concrete as we might have once thought they would be.
Especially after 27 years. Like, a lot of things can go on, a lot of theories, a lot of talk you can forget.
Yeah. So I hate to say it at your young age, but does it make you wonder about the absoluteness of things you know?
Well, I know what they had back then was very different to what we have right now, but it's still, it does make me wonder a little bit. I mean, even if we do find all the wreckage from MH370, we can never really be that sure. People say with confidence a lot of things that aren't true. And especially after the passage of time, things change, and it does make me question and doubt. But for the most, I kind of trust what's going on. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today.
It's lovely to talk to you.
Well,
I always learn something when I talk to you.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you next time.
Absolutely.